Alice Corday, and welcome to Queerer, a podcast about queer positivity. Today's episode, I'll be taking a look at your responses to our form. After, I'll be taking a look at the BBC's recent stance on trans issues. Now, let's get into your responses to the form. What are your thoughts about the current attitude towards queer people present in the UK media and politics? I think we as a community are very misunderstood. There are many ideas about us that demonise us, when we are simply a community trying to survive. They label us as fakes, as a trend, as unnatural, without ever even asking us or trying to educate themselves to rethink their ignorance. How has this attitude impacted your life as a queer person? I have been called slurs, misunderstood, invalidated and discriminated against. Very few people understood what my identity is when I first came out. Many believed that because I liked women, I was a pervert who would try to spy on people, or someone who wanted to groom and brainwash their children. What elements of current politics and media do you think deserve more attention for their positive work in the queer space? I think the Green Party and their views/policies toward the queer community. When it comes to your queer experience, are there any issues you believe aren't being talked about enough? Micro-homo/transphobia in the everyday social setting, especially within close relations to queer individuals, and the impact of self-image and worth caused by said behaviours and interactions. What are your thoughts about how queer identity has been represented in the media, and are there any identities you feel are underrepresented? I feel that demisexuality isn't discussed with enough nuance, as it is not the same as just being a prude or not wanting one-night stands. There has been a lot of misconceptions in the media about many identities, namely bisexuality and pansexuality are not the same thing, and they are not loose or greedy. In relation to how queer identity intersects with other aspects of identity, such as race or religion, do you find there to be any problems within the queer community when it comes to tackling these other aspects? There is the assumption that a lot of the queer community are not religious, and that they are enemies of each other, which is so far from the case. As someone who had religious trauma myself, it doesn't mean either community can demonise the other simply based on the other's identity. How has being queer affected your life in a positive way? I know how to love at my most genuine, and I have found family and friendship and the people around me. I am rich because my life is full of love and care and whimsy and growth and people that like me for me. This project is about showcasing positivity amidst an admittedly troubling period for queer people. When it comes to that mission statement, do you believe this is the best approach, or are there criticisms or questions you have about the project? There's a lot of podcasts out there, and a decent amount of them are run by or are about the queer community. How are you going to make your and our voices heard in an effective and proactive manner that benefits the community? Now, whilst I didn't give any commentary on the other questions, this is the one where I will, as it's asking me a direct question. Hopefully it's clear that whilst this is my podcast and I am the host, the ultimate goal isn't about me. Why I think this matters, why I think this is beneficial, is because of how influenced this show is by the community. So now I think we should move on to today's topic about the BBC, and after that we'll end this week's episode with a letter to the future. I imagine I don't need to tell you what the BBC is. Likely you already know that they're the largest news provider in the UK, that they hold themselves being impartial, factual and independent. Now that may be true in some cases, but let me just read you off some headlines from various articles published by the BBC on the trans topic. Woman backed by J.K. Rowling says she was subjected to a witch hunt. Trans activists vandalise feminist conference. Nurse says trans colleague put her in panic mode. Now I could focus on the famous articles showcasing my problems with the BBC, such as lesbians are being pressed into sex by trans women. However, I felt it was best to focus on the recent ones that at first seem normal to people outside of queer spaces and that create the harmful culture we exist in. Woman backed by J.K. Rowling says she was subject to a witch hunt was an article published to the BBC website on the 11th of November and was written by Lindsay Telford. Let me summarise for you what the article says and then what actually happened. The article talks about Sarah Morrison's case against her employer as she claimed discrimination based on her views regarding biological sex and the safeguarding of women and children. She believes she was a victim of a witch hunt by the LGBTQ community. What actually happened here is a known transphobe who is a member of an anti-trans hate group, Gen Spect, was part of an inclusion role at Belfast Film Festival, and rightfully so was pressured off of it after her views came to light. Now, let me make my issue clear. The article itself is okay. The content isn't crazy offensive. All I want for it is to include some more context as to who Sarah Morton is, so that those unaware are made clear that while she claims she's an anti-trans, that is clearly false. My actual issue is the egregious titling. Let me show you what this kind of title would look like when it comes to non-trans subjects. Man backed by Andrew Tate subjected to cancel culture. Man backed by Tommy Robinson is a victim of reverse racism. Now these examples are obviously ridiculous, but J.K. Rowling is as transphobic as Andrew Tate is sexist. So using her name like this and using the phrase witch trial is insane. Like, come on. It's such a sensationalist headline, and most people are just going to be scrolling by and see that title without clicking on it. And they'll leave thinking, God, the trans people are real mean and just bullying random women for no reason. What the hell? Like, no. This woman was a part of a hate group and is being supported by one of the most prolific transphobes of our times. So no, she's not being subjected to a witch hunt. She's rightfully getting flack for being a bigot. Trans activists vandalise feminist conference. Oh, let's take a look at what's going on in this article. Feminist conference, that sounds nice and wholesome. Gender critical focus. Focus on sex-based rights. Now these are some red flags, but I'm sure it doesn't get worse. Opposes gender ideology. Interesting. Now I'm sure there's just some bad wording. Let's hear them out. Regularly host J.K. Rowling. Huh. Now, this sounds less feminist and perhaps, dare I say, transphobic. Let me rephrase this title for you, BBC, just so you can have some pointers. Trans activists vandalise transphobic gathering whose sole purpose is to undermine their own existence. Now, I get it's a bit wordy, but maybe it would be nice to have some understanding of context and proper reporting, and maybe not directly feed into the narrative that trans women are anti-woman and anti-feminist. But hey, I'm not Joshua Askew, who did a real stand-up job on this article. Great work here, Joshua. You really showed how impartial you were with this. Now, I think that's enough of this segment. You hopefully get the point, and I would like to move on to more positive things. In summary, though, BBC is pretty transphobic, and for sure needs stricter guidelines into how they title their articles. Trans people are not getting the same kind of protection as any other minority group in the BBC's reporting, and it's a massive issue. And there are plenty of positive articles about trans people that the BBC does publish, but that does not make them immune to criticism from this blatantly transphobic reporting. I would love to end this segment with a call to action to a news source in the UK that doesn't do this and is entirely unproblematic, but I can't because there isn't one. So let me give you my suggestion as someone that has coped with years of this news cycle. I have two things that could work for you and have for me in the past. The first is essentially shutting yourself off from it. Now this comes with issues, obviously. You're less informed and aware, but if you ever get to the point where it all gets too much, this can be a temporary step in making your life better. This can work even better if you have someone you trust in your life that can filter the news for you and send you the important stuff without forcing yourself to be dragged into the vicious transphobic news cycle. The second option is a more scattershot approach. This is if you're okay reading the occasional transphobic article in kind of a search for more impartial news. You'd then just read news from a selection of different sites and filter it yourself. You become the unbiased reporting because you are essentially gathering these articles in your own mind and analysing their perspectives to come to one on your own. None of this is ideal, obviously, but if it will help you, then it's a lot better than nothing. Maybe you have a different take on all this. Maybe you have a new source that is the better option I'm looking for. If you do, reach out to me or put it in the comments. But for now, this is the best I have. I'd love to end the segment on a more positive note, but there's a reality. And whilst it's not hopeless, there are pro-queer news sites out there. Our news system does still need work. So with that out of the way, let me read you this week's Letter to the Future. I hope that the future is kinder in every possible way. That queer people no longer have to hide who they are for safety. The world right now is cruel towards us, and whilst I don't think it will ever entirely disappear, I do think the hate will lessen.